has initiated a complaint with the World Trade Organization, or WTO, over the U.S. imposing 25% import tariffs on Canadian automobiles and auto parts.
It's a rainy afternoon in Geneva on March 13, 2025, and the halls of the World Trade Organization buzz with the kind of tension usually reserved for a high-stakes poker game. Enter Canada's trade team, sleeves rolled up, dossiers in hand, slamming down a formal complaint against the United States, their biggest buddy, biggest rival, and biggest headache. The charge? Those fresh 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, slapped on like a bad tattoo just weeks earlier. President Trump's opening salvo in his trade renaissance, aimed at bringing jobs home, but to Ottawa, it's a betrayal of the USMCA handshake from 2019. As the filing hits the WTO docket case DS-635 for the history buffs. This isn't just legalese, it's a gauntlet thrown at the feet of American exceptionalism. Could this polite Canadian jab actually shatter the US's carefully polished image as the globe's trade sheriff? Or is it a desperate Hail Mary from a neighbor feeling the pinch? Grab your maple syrup shield and your stars and stripes cape, because we're unpacking a trade tussle that could rewrite the rules of North American commerce and maybe expose cracks in Uncle Sam's armor. To get why this WTO showdown feels like deja vu on steroids, we need to hit the rewind button to 2018, when Trump 1.0 lit the fuse on the first steel and aluminum tariffs under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. National security, he called it, because apparently Canadian rebar poses an existential threat to the homeland, Canada, exporting over $15 billion in these metals annually to fuel everything from Detroit's muscle cars to New York skyscrapers, reeled. Jobs in Hamilton's steel mills teetered, aluminum smelters in Quebec idled, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fired back with $12.6 billion in retaliatory tariffs on American icons like Harley-Davidson and ketchup. The world watched as allies turned adversaries, but diplomacy won out. Exemptions were granted in May 2019, baked into the USMCA, the Fair and Reciprocal Trade Pact. Trump branded his triumph. Fast forward through a pandemic, a Biden interlude of relative calm, and Trump's 2024 landslide. Inaugurated in January 2025, he wastes no time. On February 10, the exemptions vanish. By March 12, the 25% steel and 10% aluminum duties, quickly hiked to 25% across the board, are live, hitting Canada harder than most. Why? Trump tweets about unfair dumping and border vulnerabilities, but insiders whisper it's leverage for bigger asks, like prying open Canada's dairy fortress or curbing migrant flows. Enter stage left. Ontario's electricity surcharge threat, a brief 50% tariff scare, and a hasty de-escalation. But the baseline tariffs stick, and Canada, under new PM Mark Carney, decides enough's enough. So it is. The filing itself is a masterstroke of multilateral muscle flexing. And here's how it plays out in the WTO's labyrinthine arena. Consultations kick off within 10 days. Think mandatory coffee chats where Canada lays out its case. These tariffs violate GATT Article I's most favored nation principle, treating Canadian goods worse than, say, Brazil's, and flout. USMCA. Chapter 32's rules on performance requirements. If talks flop after 60 days, spoiler, they often do, a panel forms. 3 trade wonks from neutral corners who dissect evidence like forensic accountants. Canada's got precedent on its side. In the 2018 DS5D saga, WTO panels ruled twice against the US, deeming the national security excuse a sham when used for economic protectionism. The US lost on subsidies too, with panels slapping down, zeroing, practices that inflated dumping margins. Fast forward to 2025, and the decks stacked similarly. Canada's team cites integrated supply chains where 80% of its steel ends up in US products, arguing true security threats don't come from a neighbor sharing intelligence and fighter jets. But here's the wild card. The appellate body, the WTO's Supreme Court, is a zombie since 2019, thanks to US blocks on judge appointments. Trump called it captured by globalists, Critics say it's Washington torching the rulebook to dodge rulings. Without appeals, panel decisions stand unappealed but unenforceable, leaving Canada with a moral victory and the right to retaliate, like hiking duties on U.S. whiskey or soybeans anew. Expect a verdict by late 2026. But the real fireworks? Retaliation lists that could cost American exporters $5 billion annually, per TD Economics estimates. For Canada, this WTO volley is less about quick cash and more about buying breathing room in a tariff typhoon. The immediate hit from the 25% duties? Brutal. Steel exports plunged 18% in Q1 2025, idling 5,000 workers in Sault Ste. Marie, and spiking costs for downstream giants like Magna International, which assembles half the cars sold in North America. Aluminum's worse. Kitimat's Rio Tinto smelter, a $6 billion green energy behemoth, faces shutdowns without U.S. markets, threatening 1,200 jobs and BC's clean tech dreams. Carney's government, blending banker savvy with activist fire, frames the case as a defense of sovereignty. "We're not begging, we're enforcing the deals we inked," he tells Parliament. Retaliation's already in play: 25% surtaxes on $20 billion of U.S. goods, targeting red state pork and Louisiana crawfish to twist political arms. Economists at the Fraser Institute peg the net drag at 0.7% of GDP this year. But a WTO win could unlock exemptions, stabilizing the loonie down 3% since February and juicing exports by $3 billion. It's asymmetric warfare at its finest. Canada, the 10th largest economy, punching up against the behemoth, using Geneva's gavel to rally allies like the EU, already probing US duties, and Mexico, eyeing its own filing. Ford in Ontario cheers it as standing tall, while Carney leverages his Goldman Sachs Rolodex for quiet talks, because who needs drama when you've got diplomacy? Now, flip the script. Does this Canadian court date torch the US trade image, or just singe the edges? Trump's camp spins it as badge of honor bravado, fake news from the globalists. He posts on Truth Social, flanked by steelworkers in Pittsburgh. Advisors like Robert Lighthizer, architect of the 2018 wars, argue Section 232 is ironclad domestic law, WTO be damned. The US has ignored panels before, paying minimal fines while protecting 140,000 steel jobs. But peel back the MAGA gloss and cracks show. The US has lost 24 WTO cases since 2017, more than any peer, eroding its cred as the rules-based orders enforcer. Allies whisper, if Washington flouts pacts with Canada, its top energy supplier and third largest partner, how can it lecture China on IP theft or the EU on subsidies? The Peterson Institute warns of a trust deficit, with foreign direct investment in US manufacturing dipping 12% YTD as partners hedge bets. Domestically, it's a boomerang. Higher metal costs inflate everything from Ford F-150s up 800 to Budweiser cans, fueling 4.2% inflation and grumbles from the Chamber of Commerce. Swing state senators from Ohio to Michigan tariff cheerleaders now fret retaliatory hits on $30 billion in exports. Globally, it's a PR gut punch. Brazil and India cite the case in their own disputes, while Beijing chuckles at the irony of America's America First isolation. As one WTO insider quips, the US built this house, now it's burning the furniture to stay warm. Gazing into the crystal ball, this WTO saga could be the spark that either forges a tougher USMCA 2.0 or fans flames into a full inferno. Optimists like Scotiabank's Jean-François Perrault see a panel ruling forcing Trump's hand by mid-2026, paving exemptions tied to Buy American quotas or joint border tech. Carney's betting on it, pairing the filing with bilateral charm offensives. Think Mar-a-Lago summits where hockey pucks meet golf clubs. Pessimists? They point to the appellate body paralysis as Trump's gift to chaos. Without appeals, enforcement crumbles, inviting copycats from Ankara to Buenos Aires. Broader ripples hit hard: global steel prices up 15%, supply chains fraying as Vietnam and Turkey snag diverted flows. For the US, a loss amplifies calls to quit the WTO altogether, as floated by Heritage Foundation hawks, potentially ceding moral high ground to a multipolar mess where BRICS blocs thrive. Canada, meanwhile, doubles down on diversification. $10 billion in EU green steel deals, Asian auto packs, and domestic subsidies to retool mills for EVs. If history rhymes, 2018's truce took 9 months. This could drag into 2027, with midterm elections as the wild card. Trump thrives on brinkmanship, but a string of losses might nudge even him toward compromise, lest trade warrior morphs into trade pariah. So, does Canada's WTO filing destroy the US trade image? It's no apocalypse, but it's a seismic tremor, exposing the emperor's tariffs as threadbare, reminding the world that even superpowers bleed when they bend the rules. For the US, it's a wake-up, bully the backyard, and the neighbors start lawyering up. For Canada, it's vindication, the polite enforcer proving nice guys finish with rulings, not just apologies. In this borderless brawl, the real losers are consumers paying premium for protectionism's promise. As the panel convenes and tweets fly, one truth endures: trade isn't zero-sum, it's a tapestry, and pulling one thread unravels us all. What's your take? WTO win for the North, or just more hot air in the trade winds?